Well, howdy. Welcome to Bienville Studios. Come on in. My name's JT Nesbitt, and as some of y'all might be aware, I have a huge passion for motorcycles, but I'm also a car guy. In fact, I've been either restoring, racing, or building cars since I was in high school. When it came time for me to buy my dream car, I made a very interesting decision, which is the topic of this film. You know, ever since I was a kid, for me there's always been one brand synonymous with passion, desire, beauty, and performance. And a quote that I just can't seem to get out of my head. That quote, "I sell engines. The rest of the car I throw in for free." Made by Enzo Ferrari himself. The car that Enzo chose to drive for his own personal transportation was a GT 330 2+2. Ah, the halcyon days of the 60s for Ferrari. So when I started shopping for a Ferrari, I had to take the old man's advice. I started shopping for an engine. Now I knew it had to be a 12-cylinder. I loved the flat 12 in the Berlinetta Boxster and the Testarossa, but at 6'4", I'm a tall drink of water and I simply can't fold myself up into either of those cars. Well, what other Ferrari engines are there out there? When it comes to V12 Ferrari engines, for me, it has to be the 65-degree dual overhead cam 4-valve engine that traces its architecture all the way back to the V6 Dino program of 1957, led by that master engineer Vittorio Jano, responsible for two of my favorite race cars, the Alfa Romeo P3 and the Lancia D50. With modern architecture and modern construction techniques, this engine is the basis for all modern Ferrari V12 cars. So if it's going to be the 65-degree V12, which car then? Well, before we get to that, there are a couple of things that I just gotta have in my Ferrari. Not the least of which is a stainless steel shifter knob with gated shifter. It's as iconic as the Ferrari prancing horse logo itself. The other thing that I want is an actual frame. Unibody cars are out. I know it's old-fashioned, but after inspecting enough circle track cars and building a few roll cages myself, it's just my thing, man. That narrows it down to the family of cars represented by the 456, 456M, 550, and 575 series of cars. Well, when Enzo drove his personal car, what did he choose? It was a 330 GT 2+2. And I can't help but to think that when Enzo decided to relive his glory days, he decided to build a car for himself. This video is dedicated to the largely unappreciated and misunderstood 456 GT. Isn't she lovely? Started in 1988, the 456 was the last project that Enzo himself had a hand in. After Enzo's death, Luca Montezemolo took over as managing director of Ferrari with a mandate to make reliable road cars. With developmental work done by the legendary Michael Schumacher himself, this gorgeous Pininfarina body and that 65-degree V12 engine, the 456 debuted at the Geneva Auto Show in 1992. But what's it like to actually live with a 456 GT? Well, there are a few quirks. Come on, let's take a ride, and I'll tell you all about them. So here we are rolling in the 456, and when they say it's a flash car, what they really mean is the little lights on the dashboard always be blinking on and off at you. Have a look. We're on the way to our good friend Jim Lindsay. He's the Ferrari mechanic for the entire New Orleans area and one of the best Ferrari mechanics on the Gulf Coast, maybe the top guy. He's a good friend of mine, and we're going to go talk to him about these little blinking lights. Sometimes he just tells me to put electrical tape over them, and that's how you fix it. But let's see what he says today. So there's a lot of great things about this car and some things that are a little weird. One of the first things that you'll notice is that the car won't go into second gear when it's cold. it takes a while, I would say maybe a couple of 3 miles, before the oil in the transmission is warm enough to allow it to shift. Now, you should never, never force a second gear shift in a Ferrari. The other thing that you shouldn't do in this car is a hard reverse. The transaxle has this is a transaxle car, obviously, so the transmission is in the back. And there's a circlip that holds the rear reverse gear on. Well, that circlip is pretty fragile, and if you jam it into reverse real hard, it might come loose, and you'll wind up with a third gear bouncing around in your transmission and about a $10,000 repair bill. So, when you first start it up and start rolling down the road, lesson number 1, go straight from first to third. The motor has plenty of torque. It can handle it no problem. Second, don't go into reverse hard. Always gentle reverses. So the first thing I did when I knew I had to have a 456 is I went and found this guy, Jim Lindsay. Jim is the best Ferrari mechanic on the Gulf Coast, one of the top guys in the country. Jim's a great friend and has really helped me to choose the right car for me.
Thank you, JT. Appreciate that.
And where are we right now?
At Lindsay Automotive.
So as you can see, there aren't very many like it, but this one is mine. Have a look at a couple of other 456s in Jim's shop. So I knew that the 456 was probably the car that I wanted, but which one? Well, I got in touch with Jim Lindsay, and I went out to his shop and I said, man, how much do you charge for an hour worth of labor? Well, he gave me that price. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll pay you that same amount of money to sit here and talk to me about Ferraris. He thought that was a pretty cool thing to do and a cool approach to selecting a Ferrari. So Jim not only helped me to pick the Ferrari, the right 456 for me, but also kind of helped me to figure out how much it should cost. In 1997, this car costs almost $250,000, and those are 1997 dollars. For what I paid for this car, you couldn't even buy a loaded out pickup truck. Incredible. But I bought it just the right time because the depreciation for the 456 is over. The floor is down. They're not going to get any cheaper. So when I found this car online and showed Jim the advertisement, he said, you know, that's probably the right car for you. You should pursue it and see what you come up with. So I started, I reached out to the guy who had it for sale. He turned out to be this really cool old guy named Boris Subotin, and him and I have become real chums. I email him about how his car is doing every once in a while. The guy bought it with like 10,000 miles on it, only put about 6,000 miles on it, so when I got it, she only had 16,000. Now, I'm the third owner, Boris was the second owner. I don't really know much about the first owner, but I know that Boris was an excellent caretaker. All right, now here we go on the on-ramp to the freeway. Right behind the garbage truck! With all the shit falling off of it. This is where my 456 really comes into her own. High speed cruising. And we shift into fifth. And now we're catching sixth. She tends to cruise at about 80 miles an hour, about 2,700 RPM. Now recently I've taken the mufflers off of this car as well as the resonator, replaced them with just straight through pipes. And at 80 miles an hour, it's not too bad, especially when you consider that you have to listen to it over the wind noise. As you can probably hear, it's considerable. The windows don't quite seal on these cars because they never could figure out how to get the regulators to work just right. You can tinker with them and get them to fit better. But like I said, I'm a motorcycle guy, so a little bit of wind noise for me is synonymous with travel. Doesn't bother me that bad. So here she is cruising. We're going to reset the suspension to the soft setting for a nice floaty Cadillac style ride. That's what this car is really designed for. Up on the interstate, doing 90 miles an hour, no sweat, loping along, low RPM, high torque engine. And I think that's what Enzo Ferrari really was after. A high-speed, comfortable GT car. And when my seat doesn't work well and the windows don't seal and the lights flash at me, I have a hard time working up a complaint, since what I bought was an engine and the rest of the car was free. So I wish all y'all happy motoring. Drive less often and make it more special.